Fair warning, this show contains strong language and adult themes from time to time. Sorry, Jerry can't help it.
Sick Boy Wolfgang Productions presents The Offering with Jerry Horror. A deep dive into the history of film and its filmmakers. Mostly horror, always genre.
'80s and '90s horror fans, it is time to rejoice. You've seen his work, you're a fan of his art, and now you can wear artist Mark Schoenbach's Sadist Art Designs. If you're a fan of cult classic horror, you know his work. You've seen it everywhere, from the Halloween franchise to Pool Party Massacre. Whether it's at Slashback Video or Mac and Me, you will recognize his distinct style instantly. Now check out his latest stock, including R.L. Stine and Christopher Pike inspired merchandise. Visit sadistartdesigns.com and put some respect on your swag. Where can I get my pickles when I can't get to a farmer's market or festival? The answer is Pickle Island in Bayville, New York. Listen, I've been selling a small pickle my whole life. I know all about it. From the vine to the brine, they keep their pickles cold with a delicious, diverse selection of gourmet pickles, including their savory classic bread and butter sweet chip, horseradish pickle, jalapeno pickle, and sweet Cajun pickle. They even got pickled beets and okra, a variety of sour treats for your next barbecue or get-together. But if you visit their store in Bayville, Long Island, New York, there's so much more. A fantastic selection of physical media, comics, music, movies, VHS, and Matt Roran. They're enthusiastic pickle salesmen. It's kind of a big deal. Check them out now at HormansBestPickles.com. Hey, quit jerking your gherkin and head over to Pickle Island in Bayville, New York. Welcome to The Offering with Jerry Horror, the show where we can have a quiet and frank discussion as adults about the things that matter to me, or at least that I think matter to me. Please take a moment to subscribe to our show wherever you get fine podcasts, and hey, stay up to date on future episodes. Coming up, this action star decided he needed to carry a gun while he was on set every day. He's the only action star that ever had his ponytail focus grouped. Coming hot off his biggest film ever, this is where everything goes downhill. Stay tuned, you're not going to want to miss this. Ladies and gentlemen, friends beyond the binary, it's me, Jerry Horror, and this is The Offering. Big shout out to our friend R.A. the Rugged Man for giving us that dope shout out. We always appreciate that. So much love to him and his family. I believe he's overseas right now. Who knows where he is? He's always touring. He's somewhere in the world, like Carmen Sandiego. Folks, we got a show for you today. One of the biggest action heroes of the 90s. We're going back to the 1990s today. We're going to go back to the 90s before we even get to the 90s, if that makes any sense. So you're getting double dipped on the 90s today. I'll explain that in a minute. We got a robot at work, and it's the most bizarre thing. It looks like a like Black & Decker's version of R2-D2. It's very much like when you look at a humidifier, like you buy a humidifier, it's like very cheap looking. You know, it's not as cool as the robots I thought we would get when we were kids. So they plug this thing in, and it's supposed to like patrol the hallways and see if people need help or remind people of things. And they let it go for the first week, and the people are there from the company and they're testing it. And it kind of works to a degree. And they're like, all right, this thing, like what it'll do is it'll do its thing, and then it'll know to instinctively go back and charge itself. So like, all right, cool. So they've got the robot and it's kind of working. Things are, it's setting off notifications when it needs to. And then at some point they're like, where is the robot? So the robot went into a closet and was just in the closet, just stayed in there. So it was like, does he hate this job? Like, do you get what I'm saying? Like, he doesn't have a car. I mean, he's got wheels. It was like one of those things that you do. Like when you hate your job, you go and you hide in the car. You find ways. You're like, I'm going to go to the bathroom for 25 minutes, whatever it is, because you hate your job. So they fix it, and they got the robot up and running. It, for whatever reason, it couldn't figure out how to get back to the charging port. So it would always die, and they would have to carry, it was like it got drunk, and they had to carry its heavy ass like back to the thing to charge it. This robot clearly hated his job. It's very obvious. I mean, my job sucks. I don't blame him. That's why you got to tell all your friends about The Offering, mainly because my job is terrible. I'm going to try to get a new job. I'm going to do my best. Imagine me and producer Pete doing this all the time. Imagine us doing video. Imagine us just everywhere in the internets doing our thing. So you can make that happen. Tell your friends. Leave a nice little review over at Apple. Buy a t-shirt over at TeePublic. We got tees. We got all kinds of tees. We got David's artwork there. All the stuff from the last season and some of the stuff that's... Well, we can't drop the new stuff. Can't drop the new stuff until these episodes drop. There was an episode that I wanted to do that was essentially about the whole saga of the Looney Tunes in the late 90s. And someday, whatever, I might do it. But I felt like there wasn't enough for an episode. So I kind of just wanted to sneak in this little episode before we start the real episode. Space Jam made a lot of money. And people were like initially, why is there no sequel to Space Jam? Well, there were going to be sequels to Space Jam. Animation is a tough process. When you combine animation with live action, it gets even tougher because it has to be, we're talking about numbers now, just syncing everything together. The reality was they actually did have 3 different Space Jam sequels in development. The first one was going to be Karate Jam with Jackie Chan and the Looney Tunes. And then they realized that Jackie Chan is actually a Chinese man and he knows Kung Fu. And they were like, Kung Fu just doesn't sound as good as, Kung Fu Jam. And that was going to be the hook with all of these movies. They were going to be something or something jam. This one would have featured Jackie Chan and the Looney Tunes on a wild adventure in China. And they were going to shoot the whole movie in China, and they got the permission to do it. For one reason or another, I don't know whether it was budgetary, if it was whatever. If we want to go back to a little bit of racism, somebody at Warner Brothers was like, they will never buy an Asian action star. And he's like the biggest Asian action star in the world. I'm like, it doesn't get much bigger, guys. Like, he sells in France. He sells everywhere he goes, Africa. So that didn't get off because of racism. I'm pretty sure. That's allegedly. But so the next one was going to be Skate Jam. And they were going to get Tony Hawk. And they were going to do like an underdog story of the Looney Tunes entering what was the thing? Boom Boom Huck Jam, whatever it was that Tony Hawk had. And they were going to enter this tournament and they were going to be like, it was like the Bad News Bears. Like, fucking Bugs. I don't even do the Looney Tunes, but be like, he can't skate. Yosemite Sam's terrible. And then he becomes this amazing skateboarder and we all cry. We have a hug. What ended up happening with that one, this one's even more weird. Activision had a deal as an exclusive partner with Tony Hawk because of the video games. And they said, That's what they said. Said, you can't do a movie unless we're involved because of your exclusivity with your image, your likeness, and your name being on the video games. This was some kind of weird contract he signed. They bring in Activision, and Activision are like, no, this is, at that point, again, it's like mid to late 90s. Activision is just run by a bunch of like crazy Gen X kids that are like smoking cigarettes, in the Warner Brothers offices, and they're crazy. They're partying. But when you're that age, you're in your early 20s, you're like, everything sucks, bro. That's gay. We can't have Yosemite Sam win the tournament. Like, nobody will believe that. So they clearly, Warner Brothers was like, this is not going to work. We can't fucking work with these people. So finally, this is the weirdest part. They decide they're going to do NASCAR Jam. I'm not kidding. And this is way before Talladega Nights came out. This is like a decade before. And they're like, we're going to get Dale Earnhardt Jr. We're going to have the Looney Tunes and they're going to go and they're going to compete in NASCAR. Now, the reason this movie came the closest to being developed was because all parties involved like the brand synergy. Because when you involve NASCAR, all the cars have advertisements on them. And everybody's like, yeah, dude, Warner Brothers wants to work with Mountain Dew. We're open. This is going to be good for everybody's product. So they loved this movie. And they loved the movie because it would have been a 90-minute commercial with Bugs Bunny and the racers of NASCAR. So this one that one's about to roll. Like, they're going to do it. Then Joe Dante's Back in Action comes out. The one with Brendan Fraser. tanks. And it's not a bad movie. You got Steve Martin, Bill Goldberg's in there. Not a bad movie, okay? It's entertaining, and it's Joe Dante, so it's always good, but that killed, effectively, NASCAR Jam. So I think out of the three of these movies, the Kung Fu Jam was probably the one they should have greenlit, because, like, you've got Jackie Chan. He's like a special effect himself. Him with cartoons and his sense of humor, like, it works. He's a real actor. But I think the Tony Hawk one would have been lame. It would have been like in Triple X. Like, if you remember Triple X with Vin Diesel, like, people just show up, like Eve shows up. It's like, hey, I'm Eve. And it's like, what a studio executive thinks is cool. Like, Tony Hawk's like, hey, bro, I got a new trick I got to show you. And he's like, all right, cool. Yeah, well, I'll show me that trick later, but we got to keep the plot moving. So, like, he daps him up. And it's like, hey, look, that was the time. That was early 2000s. Yeah, the Tony Hawk one wouldn't have worked. The NASCAR one might have worked because people like NASCAR. I don't know. Again, from a brand synergy point, a big colorful movie with racing cars and stuff, that might have been pretty neat. I don't know. So yeah, they killed all those, but that's why there was never, there was, and we got the one with LeBron, and Jesus, that movie is just a nightmare. I don't even care. I don't even want to know. I think it was like Space Jam Legacy. Well, can I call it Space Jam 2000? Whatever it was, because they tried to do that. It was just Space Jam 2. LeBron James is terrible, and when he did Trainwreck, they got a decent performance out of him as like a little cameo role. You want LeBron to do a cameo? Fine, Godspeed, I'm down with it, but he cannot carry a film. That was a bad idea. And here's the deal, man. Michael Jordan, terrible actor, but he has enough charisma, and the film was written well enough to hide, his shortcomings as a performer. But look, it's like one of those things, like Michael Jordan has got like a cool to him, and LeBron is just a really good basketball player. You know what I'm saying? He doesn't have that same presence. So yeah, all these sequels almost happened to these Space Jam movies. And it sucks because the problem with the Looney Tunes is they come and they go. Like, they did the whole new series for HBO Max and nobody cares. And those are pretty good. I watched a bunch of them. We're just at that point where it's like, are the Looney Tunes a relic of another era? Because, when I was growing up, when Pete was growing up, we would watch, like, Looney Tunes were always on. They were on TBS, they were on Channel 2, they were on everything. Bugs Bunny was omnipresent. Same with Daffy Duck in our childhood. I think now, and then we got a second charger because Tiny Toons was huge. And then Animaniacs came out and kind of replaced that because it was a little more fresh. We got some new characters. It's more meta, and grown-ups can dig it. So I think, look, nothing is ever truly dead. And people will still be buying Tasmanian Devil t-shirts because that even like came back where people were like wearing the retro ones, bunch of them. New era. They did like rebrands of like the classic Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck in cross colors, looking hard, giving you the the ice dagger eyes, because that was a thing. Is that cultural? I don't know. Is that cultural appropriation? Like where like it's very obvious that now they're inspired by hip hop culture. So we kind of just a refresh. All right, we can put Bugs Bunny in a do-rag. Yeah, that's cool. That'll work. I'm fine with that. Is everybody fine with that? Okay, yeah. It's funny because there was backlash for that. There used to be a t-shirt that had the WB and it said Warner Brother. You got a Warner Brother. That was like produced by the streets. I was very tempted to buy it, but I don't know. I like that. It's funny. Okay. So we're going to get on with the episode. I hope you're having fun. This is season 4. This is franchise killers and franchise non-starters. This week, we bring you a story of the beginning of the end of a meal ticket that was just so crazy. Look, once we get past the break, I'll explain it all to you. Let it be said that there was a secret weapon to both Steven Seagal and Jean-Claude Van Damme's career. And that secret weapon was VHS. Now, both of these guys, it's the 90s. They're producing close to 2 movies a year. And that's the way it works. When the iron, you got to strike when that iron is hot. You gotta be pumping movies out. But the secret was that a lot of people discovered Steven Seagal because of VHS. Those VHSs did incredibly well. What would happen was people would go, we always talk about the video store, the rent 2, get 1 free, and they would go and they'd rent 3 of Steven Seagal's movies. And then when it was time for the new one to come out in theaters, that really hyped people up. So he had so much momentum because he made so many films in a short amount of time. It's the same thing with Van Damme. And that's why I will attribute it to both actors' burnout, where they just became so like magnum hot that like the whole world, they're on Arsenio Hall, they're everywhere. And well, we know Van Damme's problems. We've talked about them in some previous episodes. Go listen to those. Sick plug. Bloodsport's a good one. Go back and listen to that. Let me preface this for you. One cannot truly understand the essence of the mystique that is Steven Seagal without seeing On Deadly Ground. If you took the soul and the spirit of Steven Seagal and you condensed it, you grinded it down to a fine paste or a juice, On Deadly Ground is the most pungent and potent of all the films, for better or worse. It's a weird Frankenstein movie of his career because he puts it together and his persona kind of all wrapped up into one. When I tell you, is it a good Steven Seagal movie? Yeah, it's okay. It's pretty good. But are there better ones? Yes, there are better ones. But this movie, if you want to know how batshit crazy he is, this is the one for you. You're going to be like, oh my God, this guy is nuts. And it is a vanity project. On Deadly Ground is absolutely a vanity project. Let that be known. Let that be said.
On February 18th, Steven Seagal explodes on deadly ground. They care nothing for the land.
It's a small oil spill. Accidents happen.
They care nothing for the people.
The people here want to talk about the poisons in their environment.
And nothing on earth can stop them. Until now.
How much money is enough?
She knows the wilderness.
In you, I've seen a great spirit.
He knows their plan.
The whole platform is a time bomb.
Now, an extraordinary adventure is about to begin. Steven Seagal, Michael Caine.
I'm just gonna reach out and touch somebody here.
On Deadly Ground.
So let's talk a little bit about, we have to do some table setting here. So we have to talk about Steven Seagal's origins. Now, obviously, when he was a kid, he saw a man doing Aikido. He ends up going to Japan, studying. He's the real deal. These are things that I can promise you that I can actually attest to, that I've done research. I studied with people who taught Seagal. He's a bad man. He is the highest ranking Caucasian in that era. He's the 8th degree Dan in Aikido. He never became a master because I think there's a degree of just being humble. He insulted a lot of Japanese martial artists. He decided to open a school in Japan. The school's translation, the character's translated to Of Heaven and Earth, which is probably the ballsiest John Wayne shit you can do in a society that is very humble. There were a lot of Japanese guys didn't like that. They're like, "Oh, you're that guy, huh? You're that guy, huh? You're this supernatural force." So people would challenge Seagal. And it was very commonplace. You had people that were studying karate, people that were studying jujitsu. They had dojos. So he would get challenged. And a lot of times he would school these guys. Like he was legit a bad man. He was an amazing martial artist. So what ends up happening is and this is crazy because his whole life sounds like a movie, and it kind of is. He ends up marrying his master's daughter, which I'm sure did not go over well. Or maybe it did. I don't know what kind of incestuous shit was going on in these dojos in the 70s and 80s, but he had a son, Kenshiro, with that woman. And Kenshiro tried in the early 2000s to get an action career popping. Again, not a bad martial artist, but didn't really have enough of what his father had as far as screen presence. So I think he did one movie that was a starring vehicle. Because look, you slap it on there, Kenshiro Seagal. Wait, who's that? He's half Asian, half Caucasian. His dad's a big action star. This is kind of how it goes, you know? I think it was in the mold of Brandon Lee a little bit, but Brandon Lee was talented. Seagal moves to Los Angeles, and he decides he's going to open the biggest and most premier Aikido dojo in all of the land. And he's teaching, and the word gets out because basically Seagal is like a total dick. Maybe he's not a dick, maybe he's that good. He's charging like exorbitant fees. Like if you want to do a private lesson with Seagal, it's like $1,000 for a half hour. Michael Ovitz was one of the most powerful men in Hollywood, bar none. Let that be said. And he was doing some stuff at a gun range, and one night he ran into Steven Seagal in Los Angeles at this very exclusive gun range, and he explained about what Aikido was and the spirituality of it, because it is a very spiritual martial art. You really have to be in tune, like you really have to be in that mindset. You have to have that presence of mind to study this style, because it's not, Aikido is not a style like in the UFC. There are offensive techniques, obviously, but it is much more a passive style where you're using your opponent's momentum and you're taking them off balance and joint manipulation, nerve strikes. So it's just not cage ready. But back to Michael Ovitz. In the late 80s, he formed CAA, the Creative Artist Agency, and a lot of Ari Gold from Entourage was based on Michael Ovitz. So if you ever wanted to know who the real guy was, Michael Ovitz. And a lot of the storylines, some of the more fantastical things they used with Ari Gold were from Michael Ovitz. Those were like based on real stories that were floated around Hollywood. So those exploits were captured in the series Entourage. Ovitz was a star maker. He was a king maker, if you will. He could instantly make you a star or send you packing to the gutter all in the same day. He was that powerful. You know, he made careers and he shattered careers. And he was the type of guy that could put out rumors to other studio heads. He would run smear campaigns. He ran it very much like a political ecosystem. By all accounts, though, Ovitz was a nice guy. Like, he was a cool hang. Kind of a dick, but a cool hang at the same time. His biggest clients that he personally guided to stardom: Bill Murray, Steven Spielberg, Tom Cruise, Madonna, Whoopi Goldberg, and close personal friend David Letterman. He represented all of these people. He made Tom Cruise's career. He made Madonna. He was the Svengali. You know, when you see in the Godfather logo, the pulling the strings, this is the guy, pull the strings. He's pulling the strings. So Ovitz is training with Seagal, and they become friends, and they're hanging out. And, you know, Seagal's not stupid. He's got to know who this guy is. A couple of months, he's studying Aikido. Michael Ovitz, and this is according to his wife, developed a man crush on Steven Seagal. She was like, this is all he talks about. He comes home and he's like, oh, Steven taught me this move today. But more importantly, he taught me how to look inward into my heart. So you've got Michael Ovitz, this New York Jew that's buying into Steven Seagal. And he can't focus on his movie projects. He's just like, there is something about this man. So he's studying with him, and it gets to the point where Ovitz is able to be like, I know you have a class tonight, Steven, but if we could do a private session, I will pay the tuition, you know, I'll make it worth your while. At one point, he says to him, this is after training with him for like a few months. He's like, Steven, have you ever done any acting? And Steven's like, I don't know. I mean, I'm not really much of an actor. You know, I mean, there's a purity to it, and there's a purity to everything I do. He says, I think you'd be a good actor. You know, I'm pretty much running Warner Brothers right now. I got everybody. Clint is a friend of mine. You know, he's the big head honcho over at Warner Brothers. You know what? Do you want to do a screen test? I feel that you've got a presence, something tangible that could be captured on film. I think you could be a star, kid. Listen, I've only known you a few months, but I think you could be a star. So this led to the infamous screen test. So Steven Seagal is brought down to Warner Brothers. He's on the back lot. They put together a stage for him that is going to be filmed on video and on 35 millimeter cameras to see how he looks on film. That's really what a screen test is. They say, look, you know, if we like it, if everybody's cool with it, we'll probably put you in a movie. Because he had done some stunt coordinating with Sean Connery on one of his films. I think it was Never Say Never Again. And he beat the tar out of Sean Connery because he was the weapons master on that movie and he was doing all the Japanese sword fighting. Sean Connery, like years later, would be like, I trained with that cocksucker Steven Seagal, and he punched me right in my eye. And I said, you fucking prick. I said, who's this guy? I tried to challenge him, but he was too mighty for me. He was too mighty of an opponent. They're thinking to themselves, listen, we're putting together this hot little movie. It's called Tango and Cash, and we don't have a villain. And we think, in our heart of hearts, that you should be the villain in Tango and Cash. And this is a guy who has never been in anything. He's never done any movies, TV. He's never been on the stage. He's just a guy with a dojo that came, from Michigan. Look, it is what it is. This is why I talk about this, and we're going to get to this in some other episodes, that these things that transpired in the 90s especially could never, late 80s, could never happen today. Nobody right now, maybe Lionsgate. Maybe Lionsgate would be like, we got a martial arts guy, he's pretty good, he's handsome. I think they would do it. Because Lionsgate is really the heir apparent. And by the way, I had stated this before, but Lionsgate made a ton of money in 2023. Action movies. They're just killing it. That, and believe it or not, they have a very good marketing department on physical media. And they sell a lot of steelbooks. They sell a lot of 4Ks. They're keeping action alive. So thank you, Lionsgate. If you'd like to sponsor this show, I will tell people about all of your wonderful films, such as the John Wick franchise. Wow, just slutting myself. I'm slutting it out. I don't even care anymore. I don't, because you know what? I like those movies. The Expendables 4 was terrible, and I loved it. Every minute of it, it was terrible. Tango and Cash is really the last big, great 80s action movie released because it came out in December of 89. And I think at that point, most audiences were ready for something new. Stallone and Schwarzenegger, got some previous episodes back for you there, sick plug. They were ruling the box office in the 80s. And I think the 90s is the rise of Steven Seagal and the rise of Van Damme. Something a little bit different. We're heading into martial arts territory, or as I like to call it, white guy karate. One of my favorite subgenres. And look, let me set up the tropes of white guy karate. White guy karate is about a white guy who is, and it's almost like The Last Dragon. That would be black guy karate. But it's a guy who's like what they would call in the martial arts circle a Buddha head, where he just buys into all this guy. He's got the yin yang tattoo. He's got, he loves this. This is what he does. When he goes out on dates, he's like, I like to teach karate. What do you like to do? Because karate's a big part of my life. These are the Buddha heads. The Buddha heads are like, and people would always say, like, those guys can't become fighters. They can't become successful dojo owners because they're basically just narcissists who are like, you want to see me do this kick? Let me show you this kick, baby. Do you get what I'm saying? Like this guy, he's taking a woman home after going to a bowling alley date and he's doing kicks for her. And so she's like, yeah, that's great. Let's fuck because I got to get something out of this. The bowling was terrible. The karate's terrible, but maybe you got a decent dick. And you need to. You need to have a big old dick like Tony Danza. Monster hog. Monster. Look, listen, this has been, people know this and it's had to come out. I don't care what Bruce Pete's trying to pull me away from the microphone right now. Tony Danza, huge hog. I mean, huge. The sweatiest hog you've ever seen. And people, I'm telling you, it was one day, this is allegedly, he was on the set of Taxi and he used to like to go commando and he had a pair of dungarees on and they didn't fit quite right. And this man in front of cast, crew, director, it flops out. The hog, he's hanging dung. He's on Taxi. Christopher Lloyd, Danny DeVito's there. He's like, that's a big fucking cock. You know what I'm talking about though. Like, it's, look, whenever you see a nice dick, you're like, that guy's guy, he's got it. That's a dick. It's like a fucking baby's arm. It's like, whoa. Well, I don't want to suck it. Maybe a little bit, maybe kiss it, but I'm like, that's a big, you can respect it. It's like you can be a bear and then you see another bear. Yeah, that's a nice bear. That didn't work either because everybody knows that in the gay community, I am a bear for better or worse. I'm trying to shave down as much as I can. It's a daily battle. Oh, God, I got so excited thinking about Tony Danza's Hog. I completely lost the narrative. It's huge. Oh, you know who else is huge? Huge. Michael Bay. Michael Bay just showed up at the Bad Boys Ride or Die premiere, and he had a gray suit on. The man's packing. Red carpet, Bad Boys, Ride or Die. Get your Google machines out. Make that happen. Damn. Yo, damn. That's why Zack Snyder will never be Michael Bay. Because Michael Bay's got a huge cock. He said to me on the set of The Rock, he said, I'm going to slap you with this thing. It's the biggest willy I've ever seen. Rumors swirl at this point that Ovitz made a bet. And this bet is very famous because it was the bet, like in Trading Places, where he, it was like for $1. And he's like, I'm going to tell you something. I've got the public relations. I've got the juice. We're going to make this guy a star. And he bet another executive at Warner Brothers, who I think was the CEO of the company at the time. He's like, I'll bet you $100. $100. These guys are fucking multimillionaires. They run Hollywood. Bet you $100 I can make this guy a star. And he says, okay. So they do the screen test, and Steven Seagal beats the shit out of his students, and they get it all on film. And the board watches this on 35 millimeter on a big screen. They see, and they're like, holy shit, dude, this guy's a fucking shithouse. He just wrecks everything in his way. You know, he's like 6'3", 6'4". He's a big guy. He's got interesting presence. That was it. Ovitz was like, listen, he goes, I think this guy could be the new school John Wayne. And people who grew up, you know, a lot of boomers who grew up in that era were like, hey, yeah, I get it. I get the John Wayne thing. He's got this stoic look. He's got, you know, he's got it. He might not be an actor, but he has screen presence, and it comes right across even in the Aikido demonstration. Warner Brothers always had success through the years, obviously the most successful being Enter the Dragon, but they had dabbled in martial arts, and they really felt it was the right time. Chuck Norris is kind of on the decline. He's over at Canon. You know, we're doing sequels to Delta Force, which is very bad. The Stranglehold, The Coke Connection. It had all these different weird subtitles, Delta Force 2. It has nothing to do with Delta Force. It is literally almost just like they just slapped it on there. It's just a Chuck Norris movie where he goes to Colombia and kills a bunch of people. A fun fact that I'd like to share with you, on not one but two Chuck Norris films, there were helicopter accidents where stuntmen got killed. It's pretty fucked up. And that's what happens when you're in another country, you're shooting something overseas and you're cutting corners and you're being cheap and people haven't had sleep. People die. It's a sad reality of filmmaking. So Warner Brothers immediately greenlit Above the Law as his starring vehicle. We'll pad it out. We got Pam Grier. We'll get Pam Grier in the movie. Oh, we got this other actress, Sharon Stone, we really like. Like, who do we got? We got Henry Silva, who's been in everything. You know, he's the Manchurian Candidate. He was in Star Trek. We'll have him as the villain. And it was in 1988 that the world was about to meet Steven Seagal. They didn't put a lot of money into this picture. They did like $8 million. They shot as much as they could on location in Chicago, and then the rest was shot at sound stages at Warner Brothers, and it made a shit ton of money. I think on a budget of $8 million, it made like $36 million, which was like really good. And then Above the Law, which is titled Nico, over in European territories, does really well. So now Warner Brothers is like, all right, this is a layup. We're in the Steven Seagal business now. So a lot of Above the Law was based on, because, dude, this guy is crazy and he's a liar and he's like, you don't know where the fact and the fiction meet. I can't even, like, getting into that and even discussing what he says versus what is true and all this, I can't distinguish some of it. Some of it's just, it's blurred lines at this point. You know, that Stoll, that, was it Robin Thicke? Robin Thicke took the blurred lines and then the Marvin Gaye estate sued him. It's like that. It's like that. Not like the song. God, that song was everywhere. It was terrible. Look, I respect everyone that listens to this show to do their due diligence and be an adult, because I am not trying to glorify, or I am just a storyteller. I'm just the man telling you the story, because this guy has done a lot of shitty things. And yeah, it's terrible. The most popular rental of 1990 one of them, top 5, was above the law. And at that point, we've discussed this before, you could make a lot of money. You could put a VHS out, and the VHS, if it sells well and it rents well, you could make upwards of $50 million just on the foreign distribution, because that's the way the business was back then. And this was directed by Andrew Davis, and Andrew Davis and Seagal became friends. Andrew Davis most famously did a picture with Chuck Norris called Code of Silence, which was shot in Chicago, Andrew Davis being a Chicago native. Code of Silence is a good movie. If you're looking for a straight-up actual movie that's not so much chop socky, but just like a good, solid cop thriller, Chuck Norris's Code of Silence. Definitely look it up. It's Andrew Davis's first movie. I think a stunt guy got killed in that movie, too. Dude, what the fuck is with Chuck Norris? Bro, if you do his movies, you're going to die. Like, people like, oh, Mom, Dad, I got a part in a new movie. I got a part in a Chuck Norris. I'm like, no, you can't do the Chuck Norris movie. He's going to kill you with his white guy karate. He's going to kill you. That white guy karate kills. We'd rather you be doing cocaine with your friends than do white guy karate. Listen, they decide, the iron's hot. We're going to strike again. Boom. Let's do Hard to Kill. So they're like, okay. Instead of $8 million, we're going to give you $11 million for this movie. And you show us what you can do. So now Above the Law became this huge hit in Italy because we all thought, Seagal says he's Russian or some shit now. Like he's like, I'm Belisarius, but I'm also part Native American. But it's very important that you understand my Jewish heritage. He has said these things. Like when I'm saying these things, and I know they're funny, but he fucking has said these things. So when I interject these things, this is what he claims. So we all thought Steven Seagal was Italian, especially with Out for Justice. Like this guy, he's one of us. He looks like your Uncle Frank. He's a greasy fucking big Italian man. You want to make a movie? You make The Bodyguard. Get rid of Kevin Costner. You get a big greasy Italian man in there, you got a movie. You got a movie. You got better movie, right? Steven Seagal and Whitney Houston, better movie in a different way. I love The Bodyguard because that movie almost was a Steven Seagal movie. But I think Whitney Houston, as much as she was out of her fucking head, she was like, I think we should get a real actor. And that's kind of how that won, because that was a Warner Brothers joint too. And the things that they tried to get these guys into, like they were probably making Space Jam, and they're like, you know who we could get? If Michael Jordan drops out, we're going to get Steven Seagal. And they're like, that is a bad fucking idea. That is a terrible idea. But you know what? If Jordan drops out, we're plugging Seagal right into that. We spent all this money on the animation. It's expensive. We'll get somebody. Seagal would be able to use one of his biggest fans as his new personal stylist, a little designer named Gianni Versace. So Seagal meets up. They're in Cannes. They're promoting Above the Law, or Nico, as it's known overseas. Gianni Versace is also smitten with Steven Seagal and is like, I'm not even going to charge you. You just let everybody know who does your wardrobe. From that moment on... There is a credit that you'll see it in every movie that he does the personal styling for until he passed, sadly. He was murdered. But you will see in every Steven Seagal movie, there's a thing that comes up, and it is essentially the Versace logo. And you're like, wow, that's weird. Steven Seagal's suits and outfits tailored by one Gianni Versace. Now, more importantly, with Hard to Kill, Seagal would meet his second wife, not the Japanese one, Kelly LeBrock from Weird Science. You know Kelly LeBrock, she's beautiful. British actress, model. Yeah, so they met on the set of Hard to Kill, fell in love, got married, and it was a whirlwind romance, as LeBrock had put it, one that I would go on to regret for the rest of my life, quote unquote. $70 million, Hard to Kill made. Now we're doing Schwarzenegger money. Now we're doing Stallone money. We're making money. And again, that was an $11 million budget, and that wasn't even the VHS gross, which was closer to about $100 million. There's a lot of money being made now, especially with the second film. Killed it on video. Hard to Kill is one of the top rentals of the 90s. I think it's like number 8 or number 9. Seagal's became big business. They're showing his movies on cable, and VHS people are loving it. The audience is rabid. They want more. So at this point, Warner Brothers, after the second film, Seagal starts making demands. He wants more money. He wants this. He wants that. And he says to Warner Brothers, because he had 2 movies got picked up, but he didn't have a contract yet completely with Warner Brothers. And that's going to change in a second. And the reason was 20th Century Fox comes and they say, holy shit, this guy's made hundreds of millions of dollars just off of the VHS revenue. Like, what are we doing here? So they said, all right, let's make a bold move. We got a script that was going to originally Marked for Death was almost a Brandon Lee movie. And it's weird because the same director goes and does Rapid Fire, but it was, we'll get to that in a second. 20th Century Fox says, listen, we know you're not that happy over at Warner Brothers because they're not giving you everything we think that you are worth. How about pilot program? You come, you do 1 movie here, we'll give you $5 million and a piece of the VHS. He says, okay, because it's $5 million, which is around that time, that's about what Bruce Willis got paid for Die Hard. And that was a big deal because that changed the Hollywood landscape. It changed how much money these guys were getting paid for big action movies. Because now, late 80s, early 90s, we're still in the dick measuring contest that is Joel Silver, producer of one film that I love, Xanadu, previous episode, sick plug, you can't fuck with us. The history's getting deep. Like, it's to the point where, like, there's, like, sub-quotations. It's like, oh, see Xanadu for more. Now, this film was made for about $12 million because that was the sweet spot for an action film. And it went on to make about $80 million. And Ovitz had orchestrated this whole thing. It was Ovitz all along. He said, Steven, go do a movie for 20th Century. And he goes, they'll give you whatever the fuck you want if the movie hits. See, that's the thing. Ovitz is the playmaker. He's figuring out, like, how can I get this guy money? Because now it's not about, oh, is he an action star? Can we cash in on him and make some money? Now he's one of the fucking biggest stars in the world. This is the power of VHS and cable in this era, that these people became worldwide stars because they would just show. Under Siege, and I didn't know this until today, Under Siege was one of the top movies on HBO because HBO back in the day had an algorithm and they knew, based on Nielsen's, how much was being consumed and what movies were performing. And they looked at the numbers and they're like, dude, every time fucking Under Siege is on, people sit and watch this movie. At a certain point, HBO gets exclusivity to the Warner Brothers library, and that's how that deal starts to spurn, which, you know, eventually Warner Brothers buys HBO pretty much. But that's kind of how that happened, because they said, look, every time we show these movies, whether it's Van Damme or Seagal, these people like these dumb action movies. Fucking, let's have exclusive rights to them so that, you know, Martin Cinemax can't show Steven Seagal, even though it's the same company. This works. Ovitz's master plan works, and Warner Brothers, fucking Marked for Death comes out. It's the #1 movie in the country. It makes $80 million, and they're like, fuck, we got to give this guy, we got to give him everything. We got to give him the keys to the back lot. He's going to be up in that water tower with the Animaniacs. Marked for Death was a film that was made for leverage. There was no other point to make the movie. It was, yes, it's more product and you're getting it out, whatever, but the real point of that movie was to have the keys to the kingdom. Seagal leverages a deal, obviously through the power of Ovitz and CAA pulling the strings. It was unheard of. He got a back piece of the revenue, which was hard to get. People like Nicholson could get it for Batman. You know, he's like, all right, I'll do the movie, but you got to give me a piece of the action. Seagal gets a piece of the action on the VHS, the theatrical distribution. He gets his own office at Warner Brothers. He has his own parking spot. He's getting all the things, like basically all the perks of being an executive, you know, where you have access to these things, whether it's spas. He now has access to all of that. He's being paid millions of dollars. And on top of that, he's got the most powerful guy in all of Hollywood pulling the strings. So Seagal begins to want more creative control. He's like, listen, he's like, I want to tell a story that's about where I come from. So like Michigan, he's like, no, Brooklyn. You're not from Brooklyn. You know what? I think we're all from a lot of places. And that's something you know, your mind is very closed. But when you open it, you realize that we're all from Brooklyn. So he says, all right, well, he's like, when I was growing up, there was a lot of mafia. You know, they were omnipresent in my life, and I was able to touch on that and above the law. He's like, but I had a relationship with these men, which he did in real life. Later on, we found out that Julius R. Nassau, who produced his films, were getting money from the Gambino crime family. So I just want to let you know that the local mafia here in New York profited off of a couple of these movies, allegedly. No, it's not even alleged. People went to jail and shit for this, but it's not even allegedly. That happened. So he's like, we're going to tell this story. You know, he's like, I grew up and I was always around these wise guys. And he's like, I need to tell this story. This is the story I want to tell. There's this stage actor in New York. He's like, I got to have him. I'm like, what's his, Jerry Orbach. You get Jerry Orbach in this film. And I think we got something. It was always these things of like trying to please him. And he's like a fucking toddler. The more power and more money you keep giving Seagal, he keeps, hey, can you do this? Can you do that? They were like, all right, but to keep the cost down, we're going to shoot it mostly on backlots. We got a New York backlot in Los Angeles. He's like, no, this needs to be shot in Brooklyn. So they fucking shoot the movie in Brooklyn. Seagal, it's really crazy. And Out for Justice is one of his movies, best movies. He's got the whole like, anybody seen Bobby Lupo? And that whole scene was basically improvised. It's a funny scene and it works because I think he understood the dynamics of being a tough guy and his ego and everything else that was going on. Out for Justice is the beginning. This is where he meets Nassau. The ties to the mob start. It was like The Godfather. They invited a bunch of these Gambino guys to the New York premiere. And you can go look at the photos. Go on the Google machine, look at the photos. There's mob. They're just like at the Steven Seagal premiere. And I think this is kind of one of those things like, yeah, the mob is in Chicago. They're big, but they're everywhere. But the reality of it is that how much of this shit are we supposed to believe? Seagal has told us that he's trained the CIA, that he knows mafia. But the thing is even if he didn't before, he does now. He's in cahoots. His production company is in cahoots with the mob. So even if what he told you initially was a lie, he made it a reality. And this is a deeply sociopathic person that would make this shit happen. People are like, oh, your boyfriend's a narcissist. You want a fucking narcissist? You look at Steven Seagal. This guy, these crazy white guy karate motherfuckers, they are the craziest. This guy is nuts. Dude, it's not even that. Like, I swear to God, I hope Joe Rogan has me on one day and we're going to sit and we're going to fucking talk about this. Because Steven Seagal is like, you know how there's like conspiracy theorists and shit? If we always talk about The Offering, what do we talk about? We say, oh, if you think there's bad movies, there's a fucking basement under the barrel at the bottom. There's always something worse. And that's the case with Steven Seagal. He's done a lot of weird shit. He did this thing. He had somebody write a novel. And this novel was essentially soft pitched as a new TV show. Seagal would go back and forth with the writer and give him notes. And this book, I forget what it's called, but it's fucking insane because I read some of it because I'm a loser. But I'm reading this book and it's like, he then grabbed his goatee. Basically, if you're a fucking dummy and you want a 300-page novel starring Steven Seagal, you go on Amazon, you can get it right now. He wants more. He needs the big crossover. He needs a Total Recall. He needs a Rambo. He needs something that your mother's going to see, that everybody's going to see. And Warner Brothers is like, no, you're right. You do need a movie that's going to cross over, kind of become culturally ambivalent, something a little more memorable than just these revenge martial arts films, because that's what they are. Every Steven Seagal movie, to varying degrees, is kind of a Charles Bronson movie, especially his, the 70s and 80s output. It's like, all right, this guy knows karate, somebody killed, insert, and they're still making these movies. We talk about this all the time. Liam Neeson makes these movies, and they're very successful, and he makes a lot of money, and I'm sure he's got really nice clothes. Not Gianni Versace money, but nonetheless, still good money. Just like even Denzel Washington plugged into those Equalizer films. One of the best things they've done. They make $100 million on release. So he's given a $7 million advance to do a new film called Under Siege that they think is going to be a game changer for him. This script had been in development. He gets Andrew Davis to direct. They say, look, we're going to give you the $7 million and we're going to give you Clint Eastwood's office, which is in the back right corner. It's the office that everybody wants. So now they tell old Clint Eastwood, look, we're going to give you a different office. It's going to be new. We're going to modernize it. The real reason was because we're moving Seagal into your old plush office. So Clint is not an idiot, obviously, fantastic director. And he's like, wait, I've had this office for 25 fucking years on this lot, and you're telling me that this karate man is taking my thing. This isn't allegedly. They moved Clint Eastwood's parking spot. Seagal parked in his parking spot, which was across the lot, in his new office. So Clint Eastwood confronts him. He's like, I think you're parked in my parking spot. And they have kind of this showdown, and everybody's watching, and it's become this legendary thing. And Seagal's like, I don't know, but I'm the future. He goes, this company believes in me. And he goes, it must have been good enough to get your office. And Clint was really sour over this whole thing. So they had words, and it became a big legend on the set. And I will say this, Clint did move his car. Take it with what you will, that he knew he had to back down. This guy's the young tiger. He's making, and that's the thing. That's the thing. That's the thing with Gerald Finari on Tonight Hardball. That's the thing, is that Seagal is basically 35 years old by the time he makes Above the Law. He's not a spring chicken. Usually these action guys, you get them young. We start to see this trend where they're older and older. And by the time he's making Under Siege, he's 40 years old. He's not a spring chicken, so to speak. So after 25 years, they sent old Clint Eastwood back in. It's like an office space when they keep sending the guys down in the basement. Like, all right, this is your new office. It's a closet. Seagal's their shiny new toy. Under Siege works so well because it has a fantastic cast. Obviously, Gary Busey and Tommy Lee Jones as the villains. It's the Busey and Tommy Lee Jones show. If you watch that movie, they're just so good. The reason Under Siege works, more importantly, and this is what I figured out, this is my equation, is the amount of Seagal that's being used. The movie clocks in at 1 hour and 43 minutes running time of credits. He's only on screen for 41 minutes. And this works because it builds the mythology. It builds him more as a force of nature, that once he shows up, the bad guys are going to get it. And I think there's something to be said for this. It's kind of like I always tell you, like if you show you have two choices in a horror movie. And your choice A is, we're not going to show a lot of the monster, the Jaws approach, because they couldn't get the shark to work. And then there's the other approach where, Jason's the star of these movies. As the Friday the 13th movies progress, we see more of Jason. Because at a certain point, the audience is like, I'm here to see fucking Frankenstein versus the Wolfman. I'm not here to, we don't need a preamble about the Wolfman's childhood or Frankenstein's eating. We're just getting to the goods. So I will say that Under Siege, out of all of Seagal's films, is the most competently made. It's a real film. It's the first movie that's a real movie and not just a chop-socky revenge tale. Under Siege was a huge box office hit, and it was well received by critics and audiences. Roger Ebert liked this movie, and he doesn't like anything. No, he got 2 thumbs up. The both of them enjoyed it. I think if we're going to talk about the apex of this Steven Seagal on-screen mythology, this is it. Under Siege is the high point. It only goes kind of downhill from here. On its opening weekend, Under Siege made $15 million. It was the first Seagal film on 2,042 screens, and each screen had a $7,000 average. From there, it went on to make $83 million worldwide, total $156 million, and projected close to $200 million on VHS and cable rights alone, which is fucking insane. This guy made $500 million for Warner Brothers. And it was the most successful film that was not screened for any critics prior to release. It was one of those deals where there's no press screenings, there's no nothing, they don't care, we're just putting it out. And usually those movies are stinkers. But in this case, they kind of had the Midas touch with Seagal at this point. It was also, and this is going to blow your mind, it was the only Seagal movie to receive 2 Academy Award nominations for Best Sound Effects Editing and Best Sound. Respectively, Under Siege lost to Dracula and Last of the Mohicans. But Under Siege, Oscar-nominated film. So, meanwhile, somebody else has a deal with Warner Brothers, and his name's Harrison Ford. And he runs into Seagal on the set because Seagal is man about town. And he's like, Harrison, I love your work. Listen, I got a rough cut of this movie. You want to see it? You come down to the screening room. I got the big one. Clint's got the small one now. That's the B studio. You come to the A studio. You come see this new movie. You're gonna love it. You're gonna love it, Harrison. So Harrison Ford lights up a big fat fucking joint because that's what he does. And we all, it's fine. I love that we've learned now that Harrison Ford is just a complete stoner. He crashes planes. He's crazy. Love that guy. He sees a rough cut of the film and immediately goes back to Ovitz and says, I need Andrew Davis to do my new movie. And he's like, well, what are you doing? He's like, I'm doing The Fugitive. He's like, well, who owns the rights? He's like, well, Warner did the show. So Harrison Ford is in bed with Warner Brothers and they do The Fugitive. And that's a huge, big hit for WB. I mean, come on, they made the sequel. They made a sequel to it without Harrison Ford. It's just Tommy Lee Jones hunting down Wesley Snipes. Like, fucking weird, man. U.S. Marshals. Robert Downey Jr.'s in that movie. He's going through his troubles at that point. He's hurting, but he's in it. You know what? Fuck it. U.S. Marshals is a definite recommend.
We'll be right back with more of The Offering with Jerry Horror.
Attention horror movie buffs. Remember the good old days back when Netflix would actually deliver physical media to your mailbox? How often do you find yourself reminiscing about those trips to your local video store, sifting through every single collection, discovering a movie treasure that you've never seen before? If niche is your knack, then Mailbox Movies is the DVD delivery service for you. Their meticulously curated collection has something for every horror enthusiast, from timeless classics to the latest releases, stuff that will keep you up at night.
But Jerry, why should I choose Mailbox Movies?
Well, let me tell you why. Mailbox Movies has an extensive horror DVD selection that you won't find anywhere else. I'm going through the website right now, scrolling down and perusing their available catalog. Not only do they have some of my favorite genre films that I absolutely love, some we've even covered on The Offering, like Scream 2, Halloween H2O, and I Know What You Did Last Summer. But they've even got greater flicks like Trick or Treat, 13 Ghosts, Feast, a whole lot more. You will not believe the selection. With simple online ordering and speedy DVD delivery right to your front door, Mailbox Movies has unbeatable prices that will give you more screams for your buck. Remember to use the promo code JerryHorror for 50% off your first month. Don't settle for less. Get the best in horror delivered to your door. Head on over to mailboxmovies.com and start your terrifying movie marathon today. Listeners and fans of The Offering can get their hands on their very own The Offering with Jerry Horror merch, now only at TeePublic. Find your own fresh The Offering with Jerry Horror high-quality merchandise, including t-shirts, hoodies, tank tops, long sleeves, stickers, and mugs. Just like the show, we've got gear that's mostly horror, always genre. The Offering with Jerry Horror TeePublic store has everything you need to represent your favorite podcast. Folks, head on over to teepublic.com right now and pick up your very own Offering tee today. You're listening to The Offering with Jerry Horror. Got a question or a story you want to share with me? It might be featured in a future episode. Email me at jerryhorror@gmail.com or hit me up on Twitter at jerryhorror. I'm also on Instagram. You can find me there at jerryhorror. Rate and review this show on Apple Podcast, and you might find your review in an upcoming episode. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to The Offering. Now back to the show. So as it stands after the release of Under Siege, the sky was the limit. Could it be? You see, this is the thing. Now, this is where studios get in trouble. You gotta stick to the formula. You don't do a movie with Steven Seagal and a fucking koala. You don't. I mean, in my heart, I want to see that movie because that sounds pretty good. But they say to themselves, can he be a romantic lead? Can we do a romantic comedy with Steven Seagal? I don't know. Can we? All right. Maybe we do something like we could do a kid's film like Kindergarten Cop. Do you think Steven Seagal could be like? The real question was, did Seagal have the ability to cross over even more into the mainstream than Under Siege did? Because now we're hedging our bets. We made a lot of money. Then we made some more money. Then we made a shit ton of money. And they're like, can we get this guy on fucking cereal boxes? Now, I wanted to just preface this at this point. This is crazy. So Warner Brothers, and this starts because at a certain point, Steven Seagal was going to run for Senate. And I know that this is fucking bizarre. He's willing to put up $2 million of his own money to go up against Feinstein. He's like, all right, well, you know, you have to do some polls and you got to figure out what to do. He's like, well, let's focus group your appearances and what it would mean for you. And he actually had very good numbers. And they said, like, look, if he can get a fucking Senate seat, we could have Seagal in office by 2000 as the fucking president. I'm not even kidding. This all happened. It is so insane. There are people, this is not allegedly, this is on the fucking, they did it. They did all this market research. Warner Brothers is like, we'll help pay for the market research, which I don't even know if that's legal. I guess it's just market research. I'm sure it's fine, but I don't know how that ties in. But essentially what happens is they do all these focus tests, and he does really well. Like young men like him, women between the ages of 21 and 40 like him. This becomes the fucking wackiest thing. Does he cut the ponytail? And Warner's is like, you know, if Steven wants to cut it, he can cut it. But you know what? Let's do a focus group. So they spent like 50 fucking thousand. There's children starving in this country. They spent 50 fucking $1,000 on a focus group. Okay, this is Steven Seagal, right? We're all looking. If we get rid of the ponytail, is it better? Or ponytail, you like the ponytail. People like the ponytail. But Warner's was like, you know what? We can throw a curveball. Maybe he'll cut it. He did cut it for Under Siege, but that was a big thing because the crux of Steven Seagal possibly running for office was all about his fucking ponytail. And if that doesn't tell you that this whole thing is just out of control and that they're, whatever. So the world is curious. What is this guy going to do next? Warner Brothers desperately wanted Seagal to play the hero in a new screenplay they had. They were really hot on this one. It's called Demolition Man. And they thought to themselves, like, wait, this is right before Van Damme signs with Universal and he does Hard Target, Street Fighter. He signs like a 3-picture deal, pay or play if they pick the films up or not. They're like, so what we're going to do is we're going to get Seagal to play the good guy and Van Damme will be the bad guy. This is how we're going to bring these two guys together. And we think that Van Damme would be a cool villain, and we can do toys for this movie. We can do Taco Bell because that's in the script. This is going to be a big fucking movie. And it was the high concept thing at the time that would launch him into the stratosphere as a worldwide star. But both men really didn't like each other publicly. Not fans. They were shit talking. They would go on Arsenio. Arsenio would ask Seagal, he'd be like, so I heard that Jean-Claude Van Damme is a world kickboxing champion. And Steven Seagal would be like, well, in his own mind, you know, he says a lot of things. He goes, and he says, well, Steven, who would win in a fight? You or Van Damme? Well, I mean, come on, look at me. You know what's going to happen. So then Van Damme goes on Arsenio and he's like, Arsenio's like, Van Damme, what do you think about Steven Seagal? And he's like, you know, it's easy to fight in a lot of the pretty suits. I don't do that. I get dirty. You see me naked. You see me, you know that I am a real man. And what's important is I take beatings. I'm not just giving them out in a suit and looking fancy and making sure I look, ooh, you know? We have a word for those kind of guys in Belgium. You can watch this. Go on the YouTube. Fucking insane that this happened. So they're both in the press. They both say each other suck. I don't know what's going on there. It's just ego and cocaine. They say, look, I don't care what happens, but we got to get Demolition Man rolling. So Ovitz goes to one of his closest friends who's hosting a party in Miami, which was the hot thing to do in the 90s. And he says, Sly, can you broker the peace treaty between these two action stars? We want to make this movie. It's really good. It's called Demolition Man. I don't know if you'd be interested, but if you can get these two guys together, I owe you one. And you want Ovitz. Hey, remember when I got Van Damme and Seagal to be in that movie? Maybe, you know, you could do something for Sly. That was a bad one. It's typical Hollywood soiree in the early 90s. Stallone was going to try to get the olive branch between Seagal and Van Damme to do Demolition Man. Stallone famously had always gotten along with Van Damme. He would see him out, they would hang out, they'd have drinks, very cool together, but nobody was friends with Seagal. Seagal was the odd man out. Like Schwarzenegger at one point at the party had offered Seagal a cigar, and he's like, I don't contaminate, you know, that's just going to contaminate me. and I don't want to be a part of that. He said, do you know where tobacco really comes from? They have children out in those fields. Do you know about that, Arnold? Arnold, let me tell you about the children who pick tobacco leaves in third world countries. He's a fucking weirdo. He's just a weirdo. Is he right? I don't know, maybe. So Stallone says, look, I'm going to make this happen. He's like, you guys, you're coming to the party. There's many different versions of this conflict, allegedly. But based on what I've heard and the best research and the books I've read and everything this is the most honest, actual account of the fight. Seagal refuses to hang out with Van Damme. They're trying to like make it happen. It's like, you know, like when you try to hook up two of your friends to date and it's just not happening. And it's not happening. Van Damme, we're at the beginning of his cocaine usage. He's like, well, fuck him. If he doesn't want to talk to me, he doesn't have to talk to me. They're getting their cars and people are leaving for the night. And Seagal is at the back of the room and they're like in the foyer. And Van Damme's like, he's like, fuck you. You want to fight? Let's fight. You meet me down in the garden. I'm going to kick your fucking ass. And Seagal's like, I don't think that's going to happen. Now, Seagal goes down to the garden. And now everybody who is leaving is like, oh shit, I'm staying. Like, we're not leaving for this. These guys are going to fucking kill each other. Van Damme takes his shit off. He's fucking stretching. He's like, I'm fucking whoop your ass. Seagal leaves. Seagal's like, I don't need to be, part of this. I'm very dangerous. I could kill this man. And Sly, I don't want to kill this man in your house because you know what? That's bad karma. And you don't need bad karma, brother. That's not what you need. You probably need a little bit of deer penis. But I've got it powdered and you can put it right under your tongue and that'll work. Yeah, Seagal was into all these weird Chinese things. And that joke is actually in Glimmer Man, but it is what it is. Seagal didn't want that fight. You don't want, dude, it's prime. This is like 1991 Van Damme. He'd whoop your fucking ass. And if he's on cocaine, he might even kill you. So fuck that. That's not a good idea. We decide we're going to make On Deadly Ground. But the thing is, Steven Seagal has to direct it. I'm going to do this movie, but I got to do it my way. And I got to speak out about the injustice that's going on in the environment right now. And this, see, the thing is we can use this as a vehicle. It might be an action movie, but it's a movie that can help heal the world. So they're like, all right, crazy. We're going to fucking give you whatever you want. We'll give you $7 million. You can direct it. Like, this is like, he's like, you gave me $32 million to make this movie, but I think I need 50. I think 50 is the only way. It's like, all right, because they're making money hand over fist. If you're at that point and this guy's making $500 million a picture, fuck it. This is it. Under Siege was the golden goose. He's not going to do Demolition Man. Him and Van Damme can't get along. That movie becomes Stallone and Snipes. So whatever, I think probably a better choice in the end. That movie wouldn't have worked with them. Maybe it would have been amazing. I don't know. I just don't think their egos were in check enough. They're willing to give him everything, what we would call a king's ransom, to do On Deadly Ground. So now he's directing, he's producing, he's on the soundtrack, just so you know. So he gets everything he wants. They need to have a brainstorming session about how to get this movie rolling. Seagal goes into one of the offices because he doesn't want to have it at his office. He feels that it should be mutual ground to develop. He needs a bigger office. So there's a line reading going on between Walter Matthau, Jack Lemmon, and Burgess Meredith in this room, and they're reading lines for a movie called Grumpy Old Men. Steven Seagal walks in the door and says, listen, we're going to pays no respect. It's fucking Walter Matthau. It's fucking Jack Lemmon and Burgess Meredith. If I was an actor, even if I was just Jerry, I'd be like, yo, these guys are the goats. I got to pay respect. I got to be nice to these guys. They're older gentlemen. No. Steven Seagal says they have to leave because he's having a production meeting with a Native American shaman. And again, this is not allegedly. All of these guys were told the story. And they are just like, you know what? We're going to go get lunch. We're just there. It's not even like Walter Matthau, notorious curmudgeon was like, you know what? I'm just going to get out of here. So I'm leaving. So they leave and go and get lunch at the back lot. They go to the cafeteria. But the audacity that he went into this room with these legendary actors and was just like, hit the bricks, motherfucker. I got to talk with this Native American shaman. So he decides that he's going to shoot this movie in Alaska. And the studio's like, please, Steven Seagal, do not. They're like, because now we can't control him because we're in Los Angeles and he's in Alaska. So they send two guys to be his assistants. They're not really his assistants. They're basically Keep an eye on him. He's fucking crazy. So Seagal pulls up and he goes, I'm so glad we were able to greenlight this picture and make it work. And Ovid says, why do you have a gun? And he's like, oh, I got two, baby. He's like, I got one here too. And he's like, Steven, why are you bringing a gun to our back lot? We have security here. Like you're fine. He says that there's a lot of bad people out there, who want to do bad things to me. And I got to make sure that I'm the justice in this world. So in order to get Steven Seagal to Canada, Ovid's had to pull some strings with the NSA and the fucking flight control people and all that shit so that Steven Seagal could now carry weapons through private planes. Can he carry on commercial? We'd prefer, but it is Steven Seagal. He did save everybody in Under Siege. So yeah, well, this is how crazy this has all gotten, that they have gotten the federal government to allow Steven Seagal to carry a gun. And this is Elvis shit. This is Elvis shit. Like when Elvis was like, oh, Richard Nixon, I think it'd be very important if you made me, he took the gun to the White House and he was just, Elvis, why do you need a gun? And that was he had two guns. He gave Nixon a gun. That's fucked up, man. Considering people try to kill the president all the time, they shot Lincoln. It's not like this is a new fucking thing. So giving a gun to the president's weird. I'm just saying. I'm just putting it out there. So they start shooting the movie, and it is an absolute disaster from front to back. He's able to get Michael Caine, previous episode, Jaws 4, The Revenge, sick plug. And Michael Caine is like, yeah, I'll do it if you pay me, because Michael Caine is like, I'm a fucking whore. Like, I don't care. He meets a guy on set who's a young actor by the name of Billy Bob Thornton. And him and Billy Bob start becoming really good friends. And it's funny because he's in the movie for like a blink and you miss it. He has like 5 lines and he's like out of the movie. He nopes out of the movie. Him and Seagal start really getting along. And they're both into blues guitar. They're shooting the movie. It's like the 3rd day of shooting. Where the fuck is Seagal? Where is he? What's going on? They go and they discover that at this local bar, Billy Bob Thornton and Steven Seagal are doing like dueling banjos at this fucking bar in Alaska. And like, you gotta be kidding me. You got a movie to direct. We gave you $50 million to direct this movie. I gotta go with how I feel. And how I felt was that I needed to make music that day and it's only gonna enhance the movie. Now, On Deadly Ground is basically like Billy Jack. A lot of you might not know what Billy Jack is. And Billy Jack was a character played by Tom Laughlin in the late 60s, early 70s. And Billy Jack was like, it was that white guy savior shit. And On Deadly Ground has a lot of white guy savior in it because he's coming to save the Alaskans. And oh boy. So basically there's a bunch of Native Americans who are being run out of this town. And Billy Jack is like in with the hippies. And he's there's, cops. And he's protecting the Native American people. And he's doing it all by kicking people because he was a Taekwondo guy. On Deadly Ground is the spiritual successor. Billy Jack is a black tank top movie. It's a black tank top movie in denim. We talk about the black tank top, Seagal, Neil Breen. Anybody who makes a vanity project has a black tank top on at some point in the movie or in their series of films. And that's the theory. It's a theory that was created and proven by Red Letter Media. If you want me to mail you the Google Drive of all the black tank top movies, because the list is like 150 something movies and it's growing, and you'd be surprised who's on this list, but we have that in the Google Drive to send you. If you need it, hit me up on social media. So yeah, we kind of get to this point where like, all right, this whole production is starting to careen out of control. Seagal has guns on set and he shows up. It's like the 4th, 5th day of shooting. And he's like, I just want you all to know who's in charge here. And he flashes, he's got a shotgun and he's on his person. He's directing and doing the scenes and he's got guns on him. And everybody is like, yo, I do not feel comfortable. Why does the director have 2 guns at all times? And he's brandishing them, Now, this is really fucked up. Of course, this whole movie was a disaster to make. It was just such an ego-driven vanity project. And they had a rap party. And there was a young woman who wanted to audition. And Seagal invited her to the rap party. She wanted to be an extra in the movie if they did some reshoots. She was from Alaska. She was a Native woman. And what ends up happening is he invites her to the party. She gets there. There's no party. It's just him at a condominium they rented. And he says, you know, listen, he goes, if you take your clothes off or whatever, you got a better chance of getting in this movie. I'll get you right in. And at a certain point, he begins to force himself on her. And, you know, allegedly, he tried to make her perform sex acts, and things got pretty fucking dark. Sexual assault. She eventually did sue him. They settled out of court. She left. This is not the first time this happened. Gina Gershon has stories about him. I mean, Mariska Hargitay from Law and Order. There's so many actresses. Erica Eleniak from Under Siege. The girl who was in Under Siege 2. Katherine Heigl was about 15 years old when she was on the set of Under Siege 2. And luckily, she had really good parents. She spoke about this on Jimmy Kimmel's show. He was like, I've had a lot of girlfriends your age. She's like, I'm 15. He's like, yeah. He goes, but that's really up to them. Yeah, gross, whatever. This is the thing is like, I love this guy growing up, but I'm like, you are a total, you're bad. Like, you're a sex pest. This is not good. Because here's the thing, dude. If you're a big celebrity, people like you can probably get laid. Like, you've had enough natural charisma to get you where you are. You could probably have a girl's like, I love Out for Justice. I'll suck your dick. You know, like, that's a total probable thing that could happen. But this guy liked forcing himself on women. This is, at this point, Seagal starts sleeping with the babysitter, Kelly LeBrock. He's got 2 children with Kelly LeBrock, and now he's fucking the babysitter. And they choose a name for the baby girl, and it was the babysitter's name, who he's fucking at that time. And that was like a weird psychosexual game with her. Like, we're gonna name it after you because you're the one who really made her. You're beautiful. Let me have sex with you, babysitter. Babysitter ends up suing him, wins. Kelly LeBrock then files for divorce. She doesn't even do it publicly. He's filming Under Siege 2, like 2 years in the future, and he just gets served. And it fucked him up, like, because like, he did all these horrible things. So as we've wrapped up production on Deadly Ground, someone comes up with the brilliant idea. We really need to promote this movie. This is going to be a tougher one because it has an environmental message. So let's get you on Saturday Night Live. Oh boy. The worst guest, the man who's never been invited back, the absolute menace who tried to do a sketch about a therapist who was a rapist, and then had a sketch that was just a bunch of stuntmen because Exxon tried to block this movie. They were like, you're saying bad things about the oil industry. So Seagal was like, you know what? I'm going to fuck up some of my stuntmen. And it's going to be Exxon guys. And they all had names that were like guys from Exxon. And he did this. And he's the worst host. You can watch it on YouTube. It's out there. There's been compilations of Saturday Night Live. Saturday Night Live is on streaming platforms. The episode is not available. It's been scrubbed. People have said it was the most miserable experience. He was the worst host ever, second only to Wayne Gretzky, because Wayne Gretzky was a terrible, you bring him in for a Wayne's World sketch, but you don't, we have another Wayne here, Wayne Gretzky. But you don't give, we tried this. Remember there was the cartoon, Wayne Gretzky, Bo Jackson, the All-Stars. We tried to make these guys things, but a lot of them didn't have the personality. You know who did have the personality? Brian Bosworth. But not enough people went to go see Stone Cold. So go see Stone Cold, because that movie's fantastic. Probably a future episode at this point. I mean, come on, like, it's coming. We know it's all coming. The Boz will be coming to The Offering. It's not even like an alleged, like, oh, that would be funny. It's like, no, it's probably going to happen. So this whole thing is a disaster. The Saturday Night Live people are like, oh my God, he's not funny. He's an asshole. This episode's terrible. He convinces them to do a musical segment, which thankfully got cut. He was like, I got this song that I really want to sing. They were like, we're just going to cut it out of the broadcast. So they convinced him, like, you know what's going to be better? We'll pre-tape the performance. He's like, I like that. He goes, in case anything goes wrong, it's real smooth on TV. And you just pop it in there. It's not live, but you know what I'm saying. And they were like, yeah, we know exactly what you're saying. We're cutting that fucking music spot. So Seagal got all those guys, the musicians from Saturday Night Live. They did a whole fucking song. Seagal sings. Never aired. No one's ever seen it. He wanted to beat Hans and Franz up. He says, I'll tell you what, I'll do it. He goes, but I don't like that Arnold. He goes, maybe I throw Hans and Franz an ass whooping. Everybody on set is just terrified. Steven Seagal. It is like even Lorne Michaels, he said, he's gone on record like it's one of the biggest mistakes we ever made was letting Steven Seagal host. Whatever, people didn't give a shit because here's the thing with Saturday Night Live. Okay, you had a terrible host. Guess what? Sydney Sweeney's hosting next week and she's got huge tits. So who fucking cares? It's always on to the next one. You got some duds. Every season of Saturday Night Live has duds. So a rough cut of On Deadly Ground comes together and Warner Brothers is starting to realize they have a problem. First off, they don't like Seagal's title, which was not On Deadly Ground. The studio thought of that one because they were like, Out for Justice, hard to... Okay, yeah, it's going to be 3 letters because that's what you do, Seagal. He called this film The Rainbow Warrior. And of course, at this point, they started to realize that the budget kept blowing out bigger and bigger because he had to do reshoots. They wanted more explosions. They said, listen, this needs more action. We got to up the level of action. So we're going to give you another $10 million for some stunt work, but you got to do something for us. He's like, all right, what's that? You got to give us a sequel to Under Siege. And it goes into production right after this one. Because now Warner Brothers is like, we're fucked. He's got all these environmental messages. It's called Rainbow Warrior. You know, and I forgot to put this in too. Before Michael Caine, who was hired as a mercenary, the first choice for the villain in this movie was Alan Rickman. And they couldn't get Alan Rickman because he didn't want to do it. And they tried to get Anthony Hopkins. And Anthony Hopkins almost did it, but luckily cooler heads prevailed. I think he went on and did something else. Yeah, another fun fact too about this movie, Irvin Kershner is the director of the Aegis 1 commercial. Aegis is the evil oil company. He was the director of Empire Strikes Back. Great guy. Basically, at the last minute with this movie, they were able to get Jeremy Irons as the villain. And then Jeremy Irons met Steven Seagal. And then Jeremy Irons decided not to do this movie. So Michael Caine kind of lucked out with this one because they're like, we'll give you $3 million. And like, you got to shoot for 2 weeks because nobody wants to shoot with this guy. Everybody had problems with him. One being Danish stuntman and actor. Sven Ole Thorsen is in all the Schwarzenegger movies. He's a big guy. You know him. He's a bodybuilder. He's a Danish bodybuilder and a stuntman. He's in Mallrats. He's the mall security, which is like his most famous part. So he meets Seagal on the set and they're doing the reshoots for all this shit. And Seagal's like, hey, Sven, how about you kick me? And just to see, I want to see what you're made of, Sven. So go ahead. So Thorsen's like, all right, fine, I'm going to kick Seagal. So he kicks him. Seagal caught his leg and threw him to the ground. And Seagal asked Thorsen to kick him again. Giving it his best shot, Thorsen kicked Seagal as fast and as hard as he could. And Seagal fell right to the ground. So when shooting the scene later that day, Seagal hit Thorsen in the throat, leaving Thorsen unconscious for 3 or 4 seconds. It looked so realistic that it is in the final film. So when you see Sven Ole Thorsen, I believe it's in the cabin scene where he comes in to hit him with this big piece of tusk, big piece of bone. He actually hits him in the throat. That's a real take, and it made it into the movie. He had some other things. He basically tagged them up. He hit him a bunch of times during the filming, and some of the stuff had to be taken out, but Seagal wanted to leave it in, so he was allowed to leave in the throat punch. Sven Ole Thorsen got hurt. Nothing fatal or anything like that, but he did have to see the medics afterwards. He was not good because Seagal beat him up. And a lot of stuntmen, executive decision when Seagal... Yeah, when John Leguizamo, he's talked about this a couple of times and kind of came out about it. He's like, Seagal came onto the set of executive decision, was like, I want everyone to know that I'm the commanding officer in charge of this team. Leguizamo was like, we're making a movie. This isn't the military. And he fucking punched Leguizamo. Like, punched him. John was saying, like, at that time, you know, he's a bit player in this movie. It's big for his career. You know, he's Kurt Russell. It's a Warner Brothers movie. He didn't want to say anything. So he never said anything until years later. But he's like, dude, if that happened now, I would have fucking sued him. I would have taken him to court. And yeah, he just, whatever. So they got the final cut of this movie coming together. It's not going to be called Rainbow Warrior because they're like, that's gay and it'll never work. That was quoted. That's what the executive said. That's fucking gay, Seagal. You can't do that. So now producer and director Steven Seagal had filmed almost 40 minutes of footage for the environmental message at the end. Now, believe it or not, this is pretty good. He talks about technology being repressed and how all these, these companies like Exxon are polluting and destroying the environment, which they were, and they still are. He gives this presentation at this movie, and the movie's already like an hour and a half, and there's 40 fucking minutes of Seagal just going on and on about how the trout are dying and ice caps are melting. He shows it to the executives. They're seeing this rough cut, and they're like, what the fuck is this? Dude, it's been 30 minutes. He's just going on and on. And they were like, no. This is not going to happen. They said, all right, listen, like maybe people will be into this. Maybe we should just like screen it. So they had one screening, and people saw that 40-minute ending, which was cut down to about 8 minutes. It's still good. Like it's good, but 8 minutes is appropriate for an action movie. Anything more than that, and you're going to lose people.
I'd like to start out by saying thank you to all the brothers and sisters that have come here today representing this cause. I've been asked by Mr. Etok and the Tribal Council to speak to you and the members of the press about the injustice that's been brought against us by some government officials and big business. How many of you out there have heard of alternative engines? Engines that can run on anything from alcohol to garbage or water. Or carburetors that can get hundreds of miles to the gallon. Or electric or magnetic engines that can practically run forever. You don't know about them because if they were to come into use, they'd put the oil companies out of business. The concept of the internal combustion engine has been obsolete for over 50 years. But because of the oil cartels and corrupt government regulation, we and the rest of the world have been forced to use gasoline for over 100 years. Big business is primarily responsible for destroying the water we drink, the air we breathe, and the food we eat. They have no care for the world
they showed it to people. Audience members booed, laughed, and made obscene gestures for the entire sequence, causing almost half the theater to walk out on the ending of the movie. Seagal was there for that screening, and he had to eat his humble pie, so they were like 7 minutes. He's like, all right, 7 minutes. So they left 7 minutes of that 40-minute sequence in there, and that is disastrously insane. I cannot believe that even happened, but it did. Anthony Hopkins somewhere like, oh God, I got out of this fucking thing. It's like, oh. At a certain point, they wanted to get the lead heavy to be played by Henry Rollins. Henry Rollins heard about Seagal, and he was like, no, I'm not going to work with that fucking guy. So another person who turned him down or whatever. It's a bizarre movie. It's a weird movie. It's still a great movie. Believe it or not, this was not the first choice that Seagal had for his directorial. By the way, Seagal never directed a movie after this, just so we're all clear. As of 2024, Seagal has not directed a film. He had a back deal door with 20th Century Fox and Morgan Creek Productions. They offered him to do this movie right around the same time. It was called Man of Honor. It was a mafia drama. Really not a lot of action in it either. It was like a straight drama. He says, well, I got to write it too. I'll do this movie, but I got to write it and I got to finish this picture at Warner Brothers. He's like, I'm going to star, I'm going to direct, I'm going to write it. Fox was like, listen, we know they're giving you $50 million, because at this point they didn't know about the reshoots. It's like, we know you got $50 million for On Deadly Ground, but we're not giving you more than $30 million. He was going to get this movie up and running directly afterwards, and it came so close to filming, and they're just like, nope, this is not happening. He said, I need $60 million to make this movie. It's like, it's a fucking mafia crime drama. We'll give you 30. I can't do it. Can't do it. There's no way I can't make the vision that I have. Because at this point, nobody's seen On Deadly Ground yet, which is not a bad movie, but it's all this environmental bullshit. It's self-indulgent. It's a vanity project. David S. Goyer, writer of The Crow, Blade, he had to rewrite the script and lines because Michael Caine saw the lines for this movie and was just like, what is this? What am I saying? So they brought in Goyer. He's uncredited, and he did the rewrites for Caine. Caine was thankful. It happened. It's okay. Because some of those lines obviously were written by Steven Seagal, and he's just like, is this a movie? What am I doing here? What is this? So last minute, after they cut the scene, the big thing at the end, Seagal says, okay, fine, I know you don't want to do Rainbow Warrior, but this is the last time I'm going to tell you guys, we're going to call it Spirit Warrior. And they're like, no, we can't call this, like, all of your movies have this thing, man. It's got to be 3 words in the title. So Spirit Warrior failed. They also, when they did reshoots, they're like, this needs more action. Let's get some more fights in here. Let's get some more explosions. We need to make this happen. Originally, there was no, like, there's a couple of different things, like with the pole fight and stuff, which is a really cool scene if you ever want to see Steven Seagal fight with a bow. They had to add all this stuff. Seagal, like, he basically brought in, okay, this is another weird scene that got cut. They shoot a dream sequence. Seagal brought in all his students to fight in this real cave, and they had problems with bats and all this other shit and couldn't shoot in the cave, and it was a disaster. This was part of the reshoots. It was basically supposed to be Steven Seagal in the 1500s, and like he's like a different, this is what he sees himself as. He has his beard, and it's like, I don't know, it's in the 1500s, and he's fighting these guys, and they're kind of like cavemen, and he's depicting these Inuit people as cave people. It's fucked up. They cut it from the movie. They cut it from the movie, and they said it was a disaster to film because the cave had bats. There were critters in there, and there was all kinds of things going on. So people were like falling into bat shit, bat guano. It was bad. It was really bad. So this movie finally gets put together, and they decide, we're releasing this in the fall. It's not going to be like, all right, we'll release it in October. We don't think it's strong enough to compete with some of the other stuff. We're going to put it in January because January is like, fuck you, it's January. It's the graveyard. And they said, no, you know what? How about we put it in theaters February 18th? And it was decided, and this is a guy who like had the last year, he had the big summer movie. He had the big you get the big summer blockbuster. And this year, I'm going to drop it in February quietly. And on a budget of $50 million, probably reshoots, let's say like 60, a little more than that. It made $78 million, and it made a shit ton of money worldwide. It ended up doing another $100 million overseas. So this movie wasn't a flop. It wasn't like, oh my God, but it was the franchise non-starter because Seagal's plan was that he was going to have this character, Forrest Taft. By the way, the studio said there's this other movie, which had made a year ago called Forrest Gump, and we'd really prefer if you change the name. And he's like, but you gotta understand, this man, he represents the forest. He is the forest. So they couldn't get him to change it, even though they were like, all right. In the marketing materials, it was gonna be like on this poster, like Forrest Taft has a bad attitude, but he loves the environment, and he's gonna protect it. They know that it made money, but it didn't make Under Siege money. It's kind of, look, if you go on Rotten Tomatoes, it's got 14%, which I disagree with. I think this movie is a solid 5 or 6 out of 10. That's my honest review. The Metacritic rating is a 3.5 out of 10. CinemaScore gave this film a grade of B+ out of A to F, and that's pretty good. At the time of its release, Gene Siskel included the film in his worst of list of 1994, singling out the melancholy tone of the film and the quality of Seagal's performance. He said, I think the pyrotechnics in this movie look low rent, and I didn't think the fight sequences were anything special. Seagal's speech at the end was more interesting than the actual fighting. Roger Ebert, for his part, stated that the movie was limited to its 2 basic qualities. It's violent and it's sanctimonious. It doesn't pay or devote close attention to the plot. But if you want to see stuff get blowed up real good, this movie will be for you. Still didn't give it a thumbs up, but, it was absurd. And the thing is, it's an environmental movie talking about the evils of the oil corporation and polluting and what these corporations still do. In the end, Seagal blows up a fucking oil rig, which I'm sure is, look, I don't know. I'm not a scientist, but I'm pretty sure that's not good for the environment. It's probably bad. So he blows up the largest oil refinery in Alaska and kills about 30 people. And the end of On Deadly Ground is my favorite part because it is terrible. There is a point where he shoves a knife into a guy's head like a sheik and then fucking smashes his head on the wall and the knife comes out the other end. It's pretty cool. Yeah, it's not good. It's a vanity project. People knew that it was bad. It's like the corniest and most unintentionally hilarious movie of his career. And it's also, I think, his most sincere and his most ballsy film. You cannot understand the essence of Steven Seagal unless you've seen On Deadly Ground. If you want it all, this is the movie that will do it. There's a lot of motifs and things that happen in this movie that you're going to say to yourself, oh my God, these things appear elsewhere. Did it get any accolades? Well, shockingly, this film wasn't nominated, but it did receive 6 Golden Raspberry Award nominations, and it won for Worst New Director. Worst Actress, Worst Actor, Worst Director, Worst Picture, Worst Screenplay, and Worst Original Song because Steven Seagal played guitar on a song called Under the Same Sun, which had to be brought together. And I had to take a breath. Steven Seagal thought that this movie could have a big hit single. And he says, can I sing the song? And they said, no. They said, we spent $60 million on this movie. We've cut half of it out. We've reshot half the movie. You are not singing a song. So he says, but can I play guitar on it? They said, fine. You can play guitar in this movie, but that's fucking it, dude. And he goes, it was like your parents telling you. And it's like, and right after that, you're going to make Under Siege 2 and you're going to like it. Because that was the deal. Look, I love this movie. Like, unapologetically, I love this movie. I think it's great. I think you should see it. It's a definite recommend. Its average rating on Amazon right now is 4.6 out of 5. Most 75% 5-star reviews. It wouldn't be an episode of The Offering if we didn't have some unhinged reviews. This is Mr. G. This is a verified purchase. So this is not allegedly. This guy bought this movie on Blu-ray. 5 stars. Best of Steven Seagal. Amazing movie and a shocking wake-up call type of speech in the end that should be told every day to every person in the world every day. We need to change our priorities and focus what's on really important. Now, I'm just reading you directly. I'm not a fucking idiot. People and nature should live in harmony, and mankind, while protecting our environment, as we and all the new generations we live in. This guy was definitely high when he wrote this shit. He was fucking woof. Great movie, perhaps the, all capital letters, greatest from Steven Seagal. Easy 5-star, 2 thumbs up film. 2 people found this review helpful. Now, this movie is so batshit and crazy that I had to give you another one because that guy's fucking crazy and he's high as shit and I don't even want to know. He's probably some transient working as a sous chef somewhere. Like, that guy could be a serial killer. By the way, just before we get to this other unhinged review, there was a guy in 2010. I'm not even going to get into the details, but he shot a bunch of people, killed a bunch of people, and it was very specific. And they think that when they found out the deal, he had nothing but Steven Seagal movies. He just watched Steven Seagal movies all day. I'm just saying this happened. This seems like a reputable name and a reputable critic. Mr. Movie Buff, 5 stars, verified purchase. He bought the Blu-ray. It is a shame that this movie and a few others are the contribution to what was part of Steven Seagal's blackballing from mainstream motion pictures some 25 or 30 plus years ago. Which is it, 25 or 30? While some film critics and government officials dislike the result of the emotional backlash from Steven Seagal in regard to the subjects or content in this movie, and some others love it. Some fans may not find it to be his best work, but Seagal kicks ass, and that's all we can ask for. And on the other hand, Seagal kicks ass and does it with a conscience. Great movie. 5 stars. No notes. So, we all learned a little about Steven Seagal today. Maybe we learned a lot. He's a wacky character. And I would love to do Kevin Costner's Horizon, New Dawn, whatever the fuck. I don't even care anymore. It's called Horizon, an American Western, Part 1. I will lightly lay the gauntlet and say, we will revisit. We will, because this is just whatever. Again, this is the beginning of the end. He does Under Siege 2, doesn't do as well. And then they're like, listen, we need to reel it back with him. They're like, how about you part of an ensemble movie? And they had to lie to him to get him an executive decision. And he's like, all right, but we're going to kill you. Like, we're going to kill you. And because it's like, we're going to set you up as the guy who's going to take care of this. And Steven Seagal would end this shit in 5 minutes. So they have to, now he's so big of a star and is getting paid so much money that they have to sell him on executive decision. So Ovitz had to come down to the set because Seagal didn't want to do the death scene. And he says to Steven Seagal, who's talking about an old John Wayne movie. He's like, remember when John Wayne dies in that movie? He's like, that's you. It's like, you got to die in front of the camera. Because when you die in front of the camera, people are going to be so shocked and so upset that it's going to move them. They're going to say, oh my God, we lost Steven Seagal. And then he goes, because I want to be honest with you. I want to do it, but I'm going to tell you something. What if people see me die and they just walk out of the movie? They say, I paid to come here to see Steven Seagal. They walk out of the movie, and now we played a bait and switch and we're giving him Kurt Russell. How can we do that? This conversation, I just want to state for the record, this was like an 18-hour day at Warner Brothers. They finally convinced him because of the John Wayne thing. This is the end of Ovitz and Seagal's relationship, because Ovitz, you got to understand, a guy who's that rich and powerful, Seagal was his shiny new toy. Time went on. He made him a star. He learned some karate. And at the end of the day, he's like, all right, this guy's a fucking wacko. But Ovitz was the only one who could talk him into doing the scene. And they did kill Steven Seagal. And it was weird. For a lot of people, I was like, holy shit. But it made sense because Kurt Russell was the wild card. It was like, oh shit. Now it's like the guy who we thought was going to save the day. It's actually a good subversion in action films, which you really don't see where it's done so well. Oh shit. I forgot one last story. One last story and you guys can go home. I'll let you go. Okay. Steven Seagal started getting really chubby, especially because he knew that he was getting divorced from Kelly LeBrock. He knew things were not good. By the way, he also got the babysitter pregnant. She gets pregnant. And that was when the divorce, she's pregnant. And then the babysitter's like, listen, I want to tell you, Kelly LeBrock, I want to tell you that this is Steven's baby. And, I love taking the kids. Your children are like my children. Your daughter's even named after me. And believe it or not, all these years later, Kelly and the babysitter are cool, and the kids were friends, and they saw each other, but both of them kicked him to the curb. So Seagal is really stressed out. He's like, I got the babysitter pregnant. That wasn't good. My wife's about to divorce me and take half my money. I live in Los Angeles. She's going to get more than half. So he starts stress eating. And it's getting to the point where he's getting a little bit fatter. And this is now we're doing Under Siege 2. And he's getting fatter and fatter. And the director brings the dailies to the studio. And they say, he looks like shit. So, now we hired the 2 production assistants in quotations for him on Deadly Ground. We're going to get him a personal trainer, and we're going to get him a personal nutritional coach. And this is a true story. It's not allegedly, because the woman who was his nutritionist was basically sent to check on him, see if he was out eating at restaurants or whatever. So she comes over to his house. She goes, well, did you hit the treadmill today? And he's like, I didn't really get a chance to do it. So she goes over to the treadmill and she's like, Steven, they need to finish doing this. They need to get some close-ups. This is when they start using the chin light, where it's to hide his double chin. So Seagal had one guy, he was one gaffer, one lighting technician who could light him without making him fat. He uses that guy from Under Siege 2. That dude is used on every movie because he's like, there's only one person who can hide this chin, and it's Bob. Bob, you hide this double chin. So he's got a personal trainer. Studio's paying for it. He's got the nutritionist. Nutritionist says, all right, Steven, you need to get on the fucking treadmill. We need to get you moving because it's going to help you burn some calories. She goes over to the treadmill. She finds cookie crumbs and this big cookie. And she goes, Steven, we talked about this. You can't be eating these cookies. Steven then responds and says, it's not a cookie. It's a panda biscuit. See now, when you go to China, this is all bullshit. It's like when you go to China, these panda biscuits, they have everything I need. It's kind of like a power bar, but it's better for the soul. She then promptly went to Warner Brothers and said, I will be resigning as Steven Seagal's nutritionist. They said, why? What happened? He's a fucking crazy ass liar and he's never going to lose the weight. Flash forward, Steven Seagal has continued to put on weight. He's probably close to 400 pounds now, and she went on to sell a bunch of best-selling diet books. So the proof is in the pudding, or in the panda biscuit, as we should say. That's it, folks. I'm about to ride off into the sunset, call it another day. Hey, leave us a review on Apple. I'll read the review live. I might even send you some flowers. Who knows? Maybe we hit it off. Have a couple of drinks. Next thing you know, you're writing more reviews. Follow me on social media. I'm everywhere. We're on Instagram. We're on Twitter. Follow our new Twitter at The Offering with JH. Because we couldn't fit all of it in there. I'm just too big. I'm too big and you can't fit it. You can't. Like when you try to take the essence of Jerry in there, you just can't fit me because I'm too big. Don't forget to tune in next week. We'll have an all-new episode. The Offering Season 4 continues. Franchise killers, franchise non-starters, and our good pal Steven Seagal. Who knows where he'll turn up next? I'm really excited about this season. We've got some fantastic movies. These are definitely some quality films that you grew up with. These are definitely summertime classics that aired on HBO and other services. I was going to say streaming services. There was no streaming back then. I'm Jerry Horror. This has been The Offering. Mostly horror, always genre. You've been listening to The Offering with Jerry Horror. I'm very sorry. Produced by Pete Bune. If you have a question or a story you want to share with me, we'd love to hear from you. You can email me at jerryhorror@gmail.com or hit us up at Twitter @jerryhorror or on Instagram @jerryhorror. You getting the picture? Subscribe to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever fine podcasts are provided for you and your family. I want you to enjoy. Just join us next time for another offering.
This has been a Sick Boy Wolfgang production. Thank you for listening.